I meant to sing a song, and clearly I wasn't meant to sing a song because I forgot about it till now. The other song I do on occasion is called Abraham. When I Lay My Isaac Down, and it talks directly about Abraham and Isaac and how the Lord asked Abraham to offer up Isaac, take him up on the mountain, and how the moral of the story in the song was it wasn't even Isaac that God was wanting. He was wanting Abraham to commit to him first. He wanted Abraham. He wanted Abraham to show him that he was first, and through that, the glory and power of God is revealed. It's kind of where we're starting today. I got you just a few verses out of here and a few verses out of 2 Kings today. Just number one, it gives you something to read about later. You can read the rest of the story. We're going to hit a few of the notes as God gives them. But the thing is, it's all about timing. That's one of the. We were singing "Amazing Grace." That last verse, when we've been there 10,000 years, we'll have no less days than when we first begun. Time is so finite here on this earth. We have so many minutes and hours per day, so many years to look forward to in our life, and how precious they have become, how precious they've always been, but we take advantage of them. And we give them so freely to nonsense, to an inkling that we get lost in a show or get lost in just chatting about nothing, but we don't make meaningful use and let time slip away from us, and then we wonder what happened. We're praying for time right now, praying for direction, and God said, do what I say, do when I say it, and do how I tell you to do it. And that's what we come to here. The first two verses here say, And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, he said, Behold, here I am. He said, Take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Abraham said, Okay, let's go. So he rose, he took Isaac, they took all the things they'd need, and he got him up on that mountain. And he laid him down. Isaac said, I don't see the lamb. Where's the lamb for the burnt offering, Dad? And Abraham said in verse 8, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. Abraham stepped out in faith, knowing that he had to do what God had willed, when God had willed it, and where God had willed it. Things would have turned out differently if Abraham would have just said, Okay, God, you want my son? Here he is. I went and strapped him to the wood outside the house where they were. That wasn't what God said to do. That wouldn't have had the result that he got out of it. He had to do it how God said, when God said, and where God said. And he did. So when he got him up there and he laid him down, he built the altar. Verse 10 said that Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son after he had tied him up and laid him down. Verses 11 and 12 say, And the angel of the Lord called upon him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here am I. He said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. I see that you did it, how I asked you to do it, when I asked you to do it, where I asked you to do it. Don't touch him. I know that you're mine. I know that he's mine. Thank you. Here's a ram to sacrifice unto me instead. Our friends Michael and Becky, I thought about this earlier. I had forgotten about this for a while. You talk about following instructions to the letter. Becky, a good friend of ours, she came down with, I think she had shingles. She had shingles real bad. And my buddy Mike, he owns a trucking company. They haul log and chips and everything. and he had two preachers running hauling for him. Now he has one, and they were all talking around Dad was out hauling, but they were all out talking, and Michael was telling him about this story, just telling him about Becky's shingles and everything. And Philip, he had this rag in his truck, and he said, "Here's what God needs us to do. We're going to pray over this." He had some anointing oil in his vehicle. He went and got that. He anointed it, and they prayed over it. And he said, "Here's what you need to do. You take this home, you pray over your wife, and you scrub those shingles." It was at that time, it was most prevalent on her leg. And so he said, "You scrub those shingles. You rub that oil all over them." God said, "You do that, and you throw that in the trash can in your kitchen, and let God do the rest." That's what he was told to tell them. That's what he was told to do. So Michael went home, and that's what he did. They went in and they prayed over those. They prayed over those shingles, and they rubbed that rag that's covered in that anointing oil over it. And then Michael went and disappeared for a minute, and he came back. He said, "Becky, what'd you do with that rag?" She said, "I threw it in the trash can in the bathroom." He said, "No. Philip said throw it in the kitchen trash can." So Michael went and got it out of the trash can in the bathroom, took it into the kitchen, and threw it in the trash can in the kitchen, because that's what he was told to do. That's when he was told to do it. That's how he was told to do it. And it wasn't 24 hours. Those shingles were cleared up. And that's awesome. And it seems like a silly thing. What's the difference between one trash can and another? It's listening to God and what He tells you to do. Asking Him for help means that you got to be willing to do what He says, when He says, and how He says it. Because it's made very plain, and I know I've probably touched on it in a few places. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Our understanding is nowhere near as great as His. It tells us that. And so why wouldn't we do it His way? Abraham did it his way. He took him. They took the journey. The notes in my Bible tell me it's about, I think it said 50 miles or so that they had to travel to get to the mountain. So he said it was 3 days getting there. But he took the time to do it God's way because he trusted. You got to trust. And I know that it doesn't. This is just opinion for a moment. But if you read between the lines, you can say, well, it doesn't say how the conversation went. How you perceive that conversation in your head is how you kind of are speaking with God at the moment. Because if you picture in your mind Abraham pitching a fit and going around and trying to stress over a different way to do it, but they leave that part out of the Bible, then is that what you're really doing when you're facing a problem in life? Or are you taking it literally? He got up and he went because that's what he was told to do. I've heard people put variations in the story. You'll see that in movies a lot because they want to fill time. You want to tell a story, a 2-hour movie with a chapter in the Bible, but they want to make it interesting, so they put bits and pieces in between that aren't covered. That's opinion. We're not here to read second opinions. We're here to read 2 Kings now. So we want to stick to the Word, what the Word says, and do it His way. I used to hear a lot, my way or the highway. The highway's broad. The highway's wide. The Bible says straight is the gate, narrow is the way. So I'll just stay off the highway, thank you very much. 2 Kings chapter 5. Doing it God's way, God's timing, when He says it, how He says it, and where He says it. A man named Naaman is a captain of the host. It starts out this chapter giving these accolades to Naaman. He was a captain of the host of the king of Syria. Imagine putting that on an application everywhere you go. The captain of the host of the king of Syria. He was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. He had a problem. Now, God has a way of knowing our problems. He has a way of putting people in our lives that can help us solve our problems. We've been looking at a few things lately on some of the churches we've been, and the road that's gotten us there could happen no other way than God sending us. Because there's churches that I never would have found on my own. I've never would have met these people on my own. But God said, "Here's where I need you," and I was there. So we found a need. We found a need where we were needed to help others, and a need where we were needed to be helped. We talked to be a help to us just as much. Y'all are just as much of a help to me as I may be. You are, maybe even more so than I'm a help to you. I know. It's just the way God. It's the way He had it planned out. I need to be here when I can, because it's good for me. I want to do it His way. Naaman they came out, and there was a captive out of the land of Israel, a little maid. She waited on Naaman's wife. We talk about being in the right place at the right time. This captive out of Israel, waiting on Naaman's wife, and she said unto her mistress, "Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy." So this little maid, who in her eyes may have been a terrible situation, she was brought captive out to the land and put in servitude to these people. But she says, instead of just keeping quiet, she steps up and says, "I know a God who can, if you just go to Him, if you can just find a way." She reminded me a lot of in the book of Esther, where it talks about, for such a time as this, you may have just been born. Well, in what situation, where have I been placed for such a time? It may seem like a huge inconvenience to me, but how great a testimony it is to the power and the will of God and the plan that He's placed for us by following that willingly in His plan and His time. This mistress she shared God instead of hiding out of spite for people who had brought her captive. And it goes on, and I know that I only gave you verses 9 through 14 in this, but we're going to get down to that part because that's where we find the meat in this. But Naaman, the king of Syria, sent a letter. Naaman ahead, and the king of Israel. I like how he admitted that he was not God. He said in verse 7, "Am I God to kill and make alive?" And he rents his clothes, and he was troubled. Elisha knew that he was troubled, and Elisha said, "Send him to me." In verse 8, he said, "Let him come now to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came. So verse 9 says, "Naaman came with his horse and with his chariot and stood at the door of the house of Elisha." Remember, Naaman, they gives all these accolades when he started out. He was an important man. He was captain of the host. So we sometimes in position, if I'm not careful, I can take on the appearance of a prideful nature. I can puff my chest out and exalt myself, knowing that I deserve such a treat. I deserve to be welcomed by this person. I deserve to be welcomed by these horns and by these chariots. I deserve all these accolades, all these gifts. So Naaman went, and Elisha sent a messenger unto him instead of coming out himself. Elisha didn't even come out to see Naaman. He says, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean." Here's where pride comes into play. Naaman was wroth, went away and said, "Behold, I thought he'll surely come out to me, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper." That's how Naaman had it played out in his head. He said, "I thought for sure that Elisha, the prophet, would have come out. He'd have showed me the power of God Himself, because that's what I deserve. I deserve to be to be touched in that way. I deserve for God to heal me in that way, in my way. It's not all about my way at all. He went away wroth. He goes on to say, not only that, he takes it a step further. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. Instead of deciding to even think about what the messenger of Elisha had said, he just said, well, they're not going to do it the way I want to do it. I could have stayed home and washed in these cleaner rivers if that's all it would have taken to be clean. Why has it got to be this way? So he started to leave because he didn't want to do it God's way. He wanted to do it in God's time. He didn't want to do it where God said to do it. But now his servants came. He said, whoa, time out. His servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, would thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? If he'd have told you to go climb up to the top of the mountain, do 2 circles on a donkey, ride it halfway down, and then catch an eagle feather, do you think that would have done it? That sounds like a fun time. Let's go try that. He didn't. No, just go wash. It doesn't matter how long it's been since you had a bath. You've not had a bath in the Jordan. Things happen in the Jordan. So why can we not? Why exalt ourselves? Why do we feel like we need it our way? Why do we perceive that it has to be our way? When time and time again, for thousands of years, it's been shown God's way is so much better, so much easier. Not saying it's easy all the time, but it's certainly easier than anything I've tried to do on my own. But Naaman said, well, why not? I'm here, the Jordan's here. Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again, like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. It wasn't in the way that he thought it was going to happen. It wasn't in the way he thought it should have happened. But when he realized, well, if all I have to do is this, then why not? I don't need all the pomp and circumstance. I don't need the flashy robe or the crown. I don't need the plaque that says, look at what I've done. I just got to go get wet in the dirty river. Why not? So, how God said to do it, where God said to do it, and when God said to do it. I keep focusing on those 3 things because if you just listen, if we all just listen, we've been doing a lot of listening. We're asking for guidance right now. And we know we got to do it in that order. When, where, and how he said to do it. We know we do that, it's going to be okay. We know if we don't do that, there's plenty of examples on how it's not going to turn out okay. You look over in the New Testament, Matthew 25. You got the wise and foolish virgins. 5 had oil, 5 didn't. The five who didn't have oil had to go try to get some because they weren't prepared. And then by that time it was too late. And it had already come and gone, and they were not prepared because they didn't take any sensible approach to be prepared. Likewise, also in Matthew 25, I believe, the parable of the talents. You got the man who gave three servants. It says in there he gave each of them according to their ability. God will be given the gifts that we can handle, the ministry opportunities that we can handle, the interactions that we can handle to provide an increase. One got 5, one got 2, and one got 1. Because that's what they could handle. And the master had expected them to be fruitful with them. But instead of being fruitful, trying to do it the way that they thought that they should have done it, they went and hid it. They buried it. Because they were afraid and they didn't know the master as well as they thought they did. They took it into their own hands instead of putting it in God's hands. That's another song. Through all of the trials of life, don't you know that God's hands are so much bigger, so much better, and so much more able to handle the load than my hands are? I mean, I can't. It tickles me to death whenever we're walking somewhere and one of the kids will come up and just grab me by the finger. It feels so good that they're seeking that reassurance, and that's what I want to do for God. Go ahead.
In the writings of Samuel, it says it's better to obey than to sacrifice.
That's right. Absolutely. So if we're being obedient, no matter what our time looks like, if we want to get to where time is not of the essence and time is so much, I can't even conceive what a time we're going to have when we just that unending day. But we got to get there. We got to be able to put, well, these rivers are better. He didn't even come and tell me what to do. He just sent somebody else to tell me what to do. Why do you need any other way than the way that God gives you to do it? And that's a struggle. When you see the way God has anointed it to be done, you'll see, maybe later, but you'll be able to look back and see how much less you were bumping and bruising. Remember a little while back, Joel was talking about that lazy river, bumping up on those sides and get little bumps and bruises here and there. You'll see how his way may still have had a few bumps and bruises, but it wasn't that Class 5 rapid that you decided to take on your own. Then you lose your paddle, and then what do you got? You're hurting. So I don't want to be hurting. I don't want to be seeking anything else. I don't want to be asking for anything else except for what He would have us to do, the way He would have us to live, and using His Word as it came upon us. It says, I like that we serve a God that has been kind enough to show us examples that we can live, that we can work off of, that we can live by, and we can move forward together, knowing that there's so much more to be had. So to be doing that, we got to be able to put ourselves aside to do it at His time. So, I don't know if I've said this here or not, but to be able to do it in His time and in His way, got to be humble. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. Let each esteem other better than themselves. Philippians 2:3. I don't want to be prideful to the fact that I need to seem better than somebody. I've been down that road. That woman decided that she was going to tell her master where he could be cleansed. Philippians 2:11 says, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and the glory of God the Father. Let that light shine. So we let that light shine and let Him direct that path, and let pride get out of the way. My uncle has a guitar that he's had about as long as I've been alive, and I thought about this recently. On his guitar case, it says Bub's Pride. Well, through a lot of issues that he's gone through and problems that he's had, he almost lost that pride. And he's still on a path. He's still got some decisions to make to get life right, but he didn't lose that pride. It's put away, And he can get it back if we just make the right decisions and decide that God's timing is better, that God's way is better. We used to ask questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Now I just want to know how God wants me to do it, where He wants me to do it, and when He wants me to do it. He'll tell me why later. Even if it's not till I get over on the other side and I get to start asking all kinds of questions. Where do I need to do it? How do you want me to do it? And when do you want me to do it, God? Let's pray.